I will never forget the shimmering light that poured through the tall windows of Caroline's house. That night, her new home in the heart of Charlotte stood 3 stories tall, every window glowing against the dusk. Each lamp reflected in the polished wood floors and glossy marble countertops. It was the kind of house that looked like it had been plucked from the pages of a luxury magazine. Whitewashed brick outside, gold light streaming from within, laughter echoing from the garden where lanterns swung from the trees. Even after all these years, I still sometimes close my eyes and remember the way the world felt as Olivia and I stood on the front porch, hand in hand, just before stepping inside. There had been so much anticipation in the days leading up to Caroline's engagement party. Olivia, only 13, had asked me a dozen times what to wear, changing her dress twice before finally settling on the simple blue one I'd bought her at the Asheville Mall. For me, the night carried a quiet kind of hope. It had been a long 2 years since David died, 2 years since I had felt truly welcomed by anyone in my family. This invitation from Caroline felt, for a moment, like an olive branch. I told myself that tonight, maybe, things would be different, that we could finally leave the cold distance behind and belong again, even just for a night. Inside, the party sparkled. Caroline had spared no expense, filling the rooms with white lilies and blue hydrangeas, the scent mingling with perfume and expensive wine. The catering staff bustled about in crisp uniforms, carrying silver trays laden with hors d'oeuvres. Caroline's fiancé, Patrick, had flown his family down from Boston, and they mixed with the crowd in tailored suits and polished shoes. I recognized old friends of the family and a few distant cousins from Atlanta and New York. My parents, Ellen and Richard, stood near the grand staircase, my mother fussing over Caroline's hair and my father deep in conversation with Patrick's father. Caroline swept across the foyer to greet us, a glass of champagne in her hand and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. She looked every inch the Southern belle, her dark hair pinned up, her dress a perfect shade of ivory, pearls at her neck. She leaned in to kiss my cheek, her arm slipping around my shoulders in a gesture that felt rehearsed. "I'm glad you came," she whispered, but her voice was tight, and I could feel the tension in her grip. She handed me a glass of champagne, then turned to Olivia with a careful smile that disappeared the moment she turned away. I watched Caroline float from guest to guest, the center of every conversation, her laughter a little too loud. The party carried on, everyone drinking and talking, the band in the corner playing jazz standards. Olivia stayed close to me, her hands clasped behind her back as she watched the grown-ups with wide, uncertain eyes. She had always been quiet, more comfortable sketching in her notebook than mingling at parties. I could tell she was trying her best, smiling at my gentle encouragement. For a little while, I allowed myself to believe that we might just blend in, that maybe my family would finally see us as more than reminders of tragedy. As dinner began, I watched from across the room as my parents took their places at the head table beside Caroline and Patrick. There were speeches and toasts and the clinking of crystal glasses. No one asked Olivia or me to speak. Instead, we sat quietly at the end of a long table, the din of conversation swirling around us. Caroline was radiant in her happiness, her hand resting on Patrick's arm. She shone, and for a moment, I remembered the way we had laughed together as children. Secrets whispered under the covers during thunderstorms. But as I watched her now, she seemed like a stranger in her own story. The trouble began just after the plates were cleared and the music picked up. Guests filled the dance floor, swirling and laughing. Olivia, eager to help, offered to carry a tray of glasses for one of the servers, her blue dress swishing around her ankles. I turned away for just a moment to speak with Marissa, my oldest friend from college, who had come down from Asheville for the party. When I turned back, everything happened in an instant. A loud gasp, the sound of glass shattering, a sharp, sudden silence. There, in the center of the room, Olivia stood frozen, a look of horror on her face. At her feet, a glass of red wine bled into the white carpet, splattered across the front of Caroline's ivory dress. The room seemed to contract around us, every eye turning, every voice stilled. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to reach her, pushing past guests who stared and whispered. Caroline's face twisted in shock, then anger. She took 2 steps forward, her heels clicking sharply on the floor. Before I could speak, before Olivia could even apologize, Caroline's hand came down hard across Olivia's cheek, the sound of the slap echoing in the stunned silence. It was as if time stopped, the band still playing softly, guests staring open-mouthed, Patrick reaching for Caroline's arm, too late to stop her. I rushed to Olivia, wrapping her in my arms, my hands trembling. I could feel her shaking, her tears soaking into my shoulder. The sting of the slap lingered in the air, mingling with the scent of wine and lilies. For a heartbeat, no one moved. My mind reeled. How could Caroline do this, here, in front of everyone? How could my own family allow it? Then, as if on cue, my parents appeared, faces grim. My mother glared at Olivia, her lips thin with disapproval. "You need to control your child," she hissed, her voice just loud enough for those nearby to hear. My father shook his head, muttering about embarrassment and responsibility. They did not reach for Olivia or me. Instead, they turned to comfort Caroline, guiding her away from the mess and the crowd, fussing over the ruined dress, leaving us stranded. I felt the weight of humiliation pressing in, the sting of betrayal sharper than any slap. The guests avoided our eyes, turning back to their conversations, eager to forget the awkward interruption. A few looked at me with pity, most looked away. I stood there, holding Olivia, my heart pounding with anger and shame. My mother returned briefly, voice cold. "I think it's best if you both leave," she said, not even meeting my gaze. I gathered our things with numb hands, Olivia silent beside me. We walked through the crowd, the echo of laughter and music following us out the door. The night air outside was cold and damp. Olivia's cheeks were wet, her head bowed. I put my arm around her shoulders, pulling her close as we hurried down the front steps, past the gleaming cars lined up along the curb. We drove home in silence, the city lights of Charlotte blurring past. My mind replayed the scene over and over, the wine, the slap, the look on Caroline's face, my parents' coldness. I wanted to cry, but I needed to be strong for Olivia. She reached for my hand, her fingers small and trembling. "I'm sorry, Mom," she whispered. I squeezed her hand. "You have nothing to be sorry for," I told her, my voice steadier than I felt. Back at our tiny rental in Asheville, I tucked Olivia into bed and sat on the edge, brushing her hair back from her face. She tried to smile, but her eyes were still red, her cheek marked faintly where Caroline's hand had landed. I promised her that things would be different, that I would never let anyone hurt her like that again. In the quiet of her room, with only the hum of the heater and the soft breathing of our old dog Daisy, I felt something inside me shift, a line crossed. A new resolve blooming in the space where fear used to live. That night, as I lay awake, the events of the party replayed in my mind like a bad dream. I could still feel the sting of humiliation and betrayal, but beneath it all, a fierce sense of purpose began to grow. I knew that everything had changed, not just for me, but for Olivia as well. The silence I had kept for years was broken, and there was no turning back. I would fight for my daughter, for myself, for the future we deserved. In the darkness, I made a quiet vow. From this moment on, we would stand up for each other, no matter the cost. That night, after leaving Caroline's house, I drove the long road back to Asheville in silence. Olivia leaned against the car window, her face lit only by the passing streetlights and the flicker of her phone screen, which she barely looked at. I could sense the hurt radiating off her, heavy and sharp in the quiet space between us. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My mind was a tangled mess, anger, shame, and a sorrow so deep it threatened to swallow me. The memory of my sister's hand on Olivia's cheek replayed again and again, each time accompanied by the sting of my parents' words and the faces of those who watched and did nothing. When we finally pulled into the driveway of our little rental, I tried to offer Olivia a smile, something gentle to assure her that we were safe now, that home was a place where we could let down our guard. She just nodded and slipped inside, Daisy, our old golden retriever, bounding up to greet her. Olivia knelt on the rug, burying her face in Daisy's fur while I hung up our coats and put away the leftover cake Caroline had insisted we take. The house felt smaller than usual, its worn edges more visible. There was something about the aftermath of humiliation that made everything around us seem fragile, as if even the walls knew what we had endured. Sleep didn't come easily. After Olivia went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, staring at the moonlit yard. My thoughts ran circles, all the years I had been told to hold my tongue, to avoid family conflict, to put on a brave face for everyone else's comfort. I thought about how, after David died, I had let my family's distance go unchallenged, always telling myself it was better not to stir things up. But tonight, something felt different. The way Caroline had struck Olivia, and the way my parents had taken her side without a second's hesitation, these things wouldn't fade, or be smoothed over by time. I realized I couldn't keep pretending it was okay, not for myself, and certainly not for Olivia. It was nearly 2 in the morning when my phone buzzed on the kitchen table. I saw Marissa's name and answered, grateful for a familiar voice. She didn't even wait for me to say hello. "Are you both safe?" she blurted out, her voice sharp with worry. "We're home," I managed. "Olivia's asleep. Or trying to be." "I can't believe what happened," Marissa said. I could hear the anger trembling in her words. "I recorded it, you know. I didn't even mean to. I was taking a video of the band and then, well, it's all there. The way Caroline hit Olivia, the look on your parents' faces," she paused. "I sent it to myself right away. I didn't know what to do, but it felt wrong to just pretend it didn't happen." I closed my eyes, letting out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "Thank you," I whispered. "Thank you for not looking away." Marissa hesitated, her voice softer. "I want to help. I already shared it with some people I trust." If you want to do something, if you want to stand up for Olivia, I'm here. I'll back you up. You're not alone." Those words lingered with me long after we hung up. Not alone. I repeated them to myself like a lifeline. The world had always felt so narrow since David died, my family shrinking around me, old friends drifting away. But now, in Marissa's words, I felt a glimmer of something I hadn't known. I needed support, and maybe even justice. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, chasing away the night's shadows. Olivia was already up, sitting at the table with Daisy's head in her lap. Her eyes were red and puffy, but she met my gaze with a determined steadiness that caught me off guard. "Mom," she said quietly, "I don't want to go back there." "Not ever. You don't have to," I promised her, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. "We're going to make this right." After Olivia left for school, I sat down with my laptop and typed out a message to James Bennett. He was a quiet, kind lawyer in Asheville who had helped us settle David's estate and had always treated Olivia with gentleness. I trusted him. I attached the video file Marissa had sent and wrote, "James, I need your help. Something happened to Olivia last night at my sister's engagement party. It was public. It was violent. My family is pretending it didn't happen. Can you advise us?" Within hours, James called. I could hear the outrage in his voice after he watched the video. "This is not just a family matter," he told me. "Your daughter was assaulted. And there are witnesses. There are consequences for this kind of behavior. You and Olivia deserve to feel safe and protected." I felt a rush of relief, mixed with apprehension. "What do we do?" "First, we make sure Olivia feels safe," James said gently. "Then, we move forward. You can file a police report. There's also civil action, given the public nature of the incident and the emotional distress. The video is powerful evidence. I'll support you every step of the way." By noon, the decision was made. I called the police department in Charlotte, trembling as I described the incident. The officer on the line listened carefully, assuring me that what happened to Olivia would not be ignored just because Caroline was well known. I emailed the video to them, copying James on all correspondence. Later that day, Marissa texted me, "It's starting to get around. Some people are sharing the video. Are you okay with that?" My hands shook as I typed back, "Let them. Maybe it's time people knew the truth." Within 24 hours, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Friends, old colleagues, and people I barely knew sent messages of support. The video, shared first among our local circle, quickly spread beyond it. I watched as the number of views grew, and I began seeing strangers commenting, some expressing outrage, others sharing stories of their family pain. A local news station reached out to ask for a statement. My heart pounded as I realized there would be no way to go back to the old silence. It wasn't long before the consequences started rolling in for Caroline. Her real estate business, which she had built on her pristine reputation, lost 3 major clients within 2 days. Social media was unkind, and some of her old friends from college posted statements distancing themselves. The story was picked up by regional news outlets, and I heard that parents in Caroline's neighborhood were whispering about what kind of woman she was. Patrick, her fiancé, called me one evening. His voice was low and uncertain. "I just need to know what happened," he said. "Caroline is saying it was a misunderstanding, that Olivia provoked her." I took a long breath and sent him the video. There was nothing left to hide. He watched it while still on the call, and when it finished, there was silence. "Thank you for showing me," he finally said, his voice strained. I had no idea. He hung up, and a week later, I learned he had ended the engagement with a brief letter to Caroline and my parents. Caroline herself tried calling me more than once, sometimes leaving angry voicemails, sometimes pleading for me to talk to her privately. Each time, I let the phone ring. I didn't owe her an explanation or forgiveness. For the first time, I realized I didn't have to accept her version of reality, or anyone else's attempts to erase what had happened. My parents sent me long, guilt-laden emails about family unity and private matters. They insisted that I was ruining Caroline's life, that I was betraying them by letting strangers judge our family. I deleted every message without replying. I had spent years swallowing my pain for the sake of family peace, but now, for Olivia's sake and my own, I finally chose the harder path of truth. There were difficult days, of course. Olivia was teased at school by kids who had seen the video or overheard their parents talking. Sometimes she would come home and sit in silence, tears threatening in her eyes. But each time, I reminded her that what happened was not her fault, that we were stronger together, and that telling the truth was an act of courage. We began to talk more openly, not just about what happened, but about all the ways our family had made us feel small or unwelcome over the years. For the first time, I let myself grieve not just for what we had lost with David, but for all the times I had been told to be silent, to smooth things over, to accept less than we deserved. And slowly, in the aftermath of public scandal and private heartbreak, Olivia and I began to feel something like hope. We were no longer alone. New voices were cheering us on, people we didn't even know who reached out to offer kindness. In the quiet of our little Asheville house, with Daisy curled at our feet and the weight of old secrets finally lifted, Olivia and I looked at each other and understood. The worst had already happened. Now it was time to build something better together, one day at a time. The email arrived one Friday morning, cold and formal in its wording. My mother had written it, though she addressed it to both Olivia and me, inviting, urging us to come for a private family discussion at their house in Raleigh. She was careful not to say what the subject was, but the implication was clear enough. After weeks of public fallout and private silence, my parents had decided to intervene. My heart raced as I read it, anger simmering just beneath the surface, but I could not ignore the persistent tug of unfinished business. There were ghosts in that house, memories and old hurts, words spoken and unspoken. Maybe, finally, it was time to face them all. Olivia was not so easily convinced. "I don't want to go," she said flatly that night at dinner. Pushing her peas around her plate, she had grown quieter since the video went viral. Her gaze sharper, her voice edged with skepticism. "They didn't care when Caroline hit me, Mom. They only care now. Because everyone else saw it." She was right, of course. And yet I could not shake the feeling that I needed to see my parents one last time. Not for their sake and not to beg forgiveness, but to make it clear that the old rules, the silence, the guilt, the expectation to endure no longer applied. I wanted Olivia to see that we could stand up for ourselves, even if our voices shook. So I told her the truth. We don't owe them anything, but I need to look them in the eyes and say it. I need to say goodbye on my terms. The drive to Raleigh felt both familiar and foreign. Every mile brought with it a swirl of childhood memories, school field trips, family picnics, Christmas mornings in the big house with the white columns and red front door. But layered beneath those were memories I had long buried: the arguments, the sharp words, the endless expectations. As we crossed into the city, I looked over at Olivia, who sat rigid in the passenger seat, earphones in and eyes fixed on the horizon. I wanted to reach for her hand, but I also wanted her to see that I respected her need for distance, for space. My parents' neighborhood was as pristine as ever: wide, tree-lined streets, manicured lawns, and brick houses that all looked vaguely the same. Their own home stood at the end of the cul-de-sac, its windows gleaming, flower beds meticulously arranged. We parked at the curb, the sun already beginning to dip low, bathing everything in a warm, golden light that felt at odds with the heaviness in my chest. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of lemon polish and old perfume. My mother was waiting in the foyer, her posture rigid, her expression carefully controlled. She offered Olivia a quick, perfunctory hug, then ushered us into the living room, where my father sat in his favorite armchair, reading glasses perched on the end of his nose, a mug of coffee cooling on the side table. Caroline was there too, sitting on the edge of the sofa. Her face was pale, her eyes ringed with sleeplessness. There was a tension in the room, a brittle, almost electric sense of anticipation. For a moment, no one spoke. My father cleared his throat, folded his paper, and looked away. My mother began, her voice clipped and businesslike. "We've all been through a great deal these past few weeks. This family has always valued privacy, and I think we can agree that what happened at Caroline's party has brought a great deal of unwanted attention upon us. We need to address the situation as adults." Olivia's jaw clenched, but she said nothing. I sat on the edge of the armchair, hands folded tightly in my lap. "You want us to pretend nothing happened," I said quietly. My mother's eyes flashed. "I want you to think about the consequences of your actions. Airing our private matters in public on social media and the news has done irreparable harm to this family's reputation. Do you understand the position you've put us in? Your sister has lost clients. Your father and I are being asked about it at church. You've made us the subject of gossip." Her words landed hard, but I felt something inside me resist. An iron core, new and unfamiliar, but strong. "You're upset about the attention, not about what happened to Olivia," I said. "You're angry that people saw, not that it happened at all." Caroline shifted uncomfortably, her eyes downcast. My father looked at his coffee, stirring it absently. My mother pressed on, voice rising. "You've always been so dramatic, Emily. Always determined to make a spectacle. Now look at the chaos you've caused." I took a slow breath, feeling Olivia's eyes on me. "You always told me to stay silent," I said. My voice was steady, stronger than I expected. "You taught me that speaking out was worse than being hurt. You asked me to swallow everything for the sake of appearances, for the family name. But that stops today. Olivia deserves better." "I deserve better." My father shifted, finally looking at me. There was something haunted in his eyes, as if he wanted to say more but could not find the words. "We just wanted to protect everyone," he murmured. "We never meant." "You never meant for anyone to find out," I said, cutting him off. "That's not the same as protecting us." Caroline spoke up for the first time, her voice low, brittle. I'm sorry, she said, though her tone was defensive. I didn't mean to hurt Olivia. Everything's gotten so out of hand. I've lost clients, Patrick left my life's a mess now. I looked at her, searching for some sign of true remorse, but all I saw was wounded pride and self-pity. You need help, Caroline. Real help. But I can't be the one to save you anymore. You did this, and you'll have to live with it. There was a long silence. My mother dabbed her eyes with a tissue, shaking her head as if the weight of it all might break her. My father sank deeper into his chair. It struck me, then, how much smaller they seemed than I remembered how their power over me had always depended on my willingness to carry their burdens. I stood up, my heart pounding. We're done, I said simply. I wish things could have been different, but I won't sacrifice my daughter for your comfort. Not anymore. Olivia rose to her feet as well, chin high and eyes clear. She did not look at Caroline or my parents. She just took my hand, her grip warm and sure. For a brief moment, I looked around the living room at the heavy curtains, the family photos on the mantel, the old upright piano in the corner. This was the room where I'd practiced for recitals, opened Christmas presents, fought with Caroline over toys, and later over clothes. This was the room where I had learned the first rules of our family: keep quiet, don't embarrass us. Endure and move on. I felt a flicker of sorrow for the childhood that could have been, but mostly I felt relief. We walked to the door together, the only sound the quiet shuffle of our footsteps on the rug. My mother called after us, her voice trembling, but I didn't look back. I didn't want Olivia to see me hesitate, to think for a second that I doubted our right to leave. We stepped out into the golden afternoon, the air crisp and cool against my skin. In the car, Olivia turned to me, her face softening. Are you okay? She asked quietly. I nodded, tears threatening but not falling. I am now, I said. For the first time in a long time, we drove away from the house, down the familiar streets lined with oaks and maples, past the parks where I'd played as a child and the old library where I first learned to love stories. As the city fell away behind us, I felt a new lightness and absence where old guilt had lived, a spaciousness that felt almost like hope. Halfway home, Olivia reached across the console and squeezed my hand. She leaned her head on my shoulder and I knew, without words, that she understood the importance of this day. We had faced the past and chosen ourselves. Whatever waited for us, it would be on our terms. That night, as the sun set over the Blue Ridge Mountains and our little house in Asheville welcomed us back, I looked at Olivia and felt certain that, at last, we were free. After that final confrontation in Raleigh, life became both simpler and harder. The noise of family drama faded, but in its absence was a strange silence and emptiness that neither Olivia nor I had anticipated. For weeks, our routines felt raw, as if every day we were peeling away the old skin of who we'd been. But for the first time in my adult life, I felt sure that every step forward belonged to us and us alone. The settlement from the lawsuit came quietly, almost anticlimactically. As though my family's lawyers wanted the whole episode erased from memory, it wasn't a windfall. But it was enough for me to dare to dream. I remember the day I saw the little house in Asheville, tucked behind a row of dogwoods on a quiet street. It was nothing like the grand homes my parents prized. Its roof sagged a bit in places, and the garden was more wildflower than manicured lawn. But the first time I stepped inside, sunlight poured through the windows and spilled across hardwood floors, and I knew it was the right place to begin again. Olivia's room was painted a soft, pale blue, but she quickly transformed one whole wall into a riot of color, a mural of mountains, wildflowers, and a sky streaked with stars. I spent weekends on the porch with a paintbrush, sanding and staining the wood, digging my hands into the earth to coax order out of the garden's chaos. Each swing of the hammer or spade felt like an act of reclaiming, of making something new and beautiful from the mess. Money was tight, but I knew how to stretch a dollar, and for the first time, it didn't matter what my parents or Caroline might say about our choices. I found part-time work at a local bookstore, and Olivia started making art in earnest, filling sketchbooks and canvases with images that captured both her pain and her resilience. One afternoon, as I admired her work spread across the kitchen table, a wild idea took hold. What if we tried to sell some of this? I asked, almost shyly. Online, maybe? Or at one of the Saturday markets downtown? Her eyes lit up, a rare spark of excitement. Do you think people would want it? I know they would, I told her. There's truth in what you make. People can feel that. So we began, slowly at first, photographing Olivia's paintings and my fledgling attempts at jewelry pendants made from bits of river glass, wire, and old keys I'd found at estate sales. We set up a tiny shop on Etsy, then braved a table at the Asheville Artisan Market, our first real public step into the world as a team. I was nervous, hands trembling as we arranged everything. But the kindness of the other vendors and the interest from passers-by soon made me feel at home. We called our business Blue Ridge Spirits, and with each month, it grew. People responded not just to our art, but to our story. Some recognized us from the video that had once made headlines, others simply sensed there was more behind our work than met the eye. They bought Olivia's watercolors, mountain landscapes, abstract blooms, quiet portraits of women and girls in moments of courage. They bought my necklaces and earrings, often telling us how the pieces made them feel brave or seen. There were days we barely made enough to cover the booth fee, and others when we went home with our pockets full of crumpled bills and our hearts light as air. What mattered most, though, was the new community that formed around us in Asheville. We found friends who became like family. Laura, who owned the bakery next door and always sent Olivia home with extra muffins. Marcus, a carpenter who helped me shore up the sagging porch steps in exchange for a painting for his daughter. Sophia, a retired art teacher who encouraged Olivia to apply for a summer program at the local college. Our neighbors did not care about family scandals or the expectations we'd once suffocated under. They saw us for who we were, to people healing, trying, and learning as we went. With time, the world felt less sharp. I had long talks with Olivia on the porch at dusk. Our words floating out into the quiet. She confessed her fears about school and friends, about being the girl from the video, but we worked through those nights together. We talked honestly about loss and forgiveness, about the cost of truth and the meaning of safety. Our relationship became more open and more equal. She was still my child, but she was also my partner in this new chapter. We trusted each other in ways I'd never experienced with my parents. As Blue Ridge spirits grew, we started to dream about travel, something I'd always wanted for Olivia but could never afford or justify. With the extra dollars from a particularly successful fall season, we planned a weekend trip to Nashville. The city buzzed with music and art, and Olivia fell in love with the murals that adorned every corner. Later that year, after saving every spare penny, we went to New York for 3 whirlwind days. We wandered through the Metropolitan Museum, walked for miles in Central Park, ate cheap pizza on a bench, and felt like we belonged in the great river of humanity. The year Olivia turned 16, we managed to save enough pounds for a trip to London. We sold extra art, took on a few more shifts at the bookstore and market, and booked the cheapest flights we could find. We marveled at the city's ancient buildings, took sketchbooks to Hyde Park, and sat in tiny cafes watching the world go by. I remember sitting across from Olivia at a narrow table, tea steaming between us, and feeling, for the first time in forever, that life was full of possibilities. We'd come so far from that cold night in Charlotte, from the years of silence and struggle. Back home, the rhythms of our life settled into something peaceful. Olivia started teaching art classes at the community center, finding joy in encouraging other kids to express themselves without fear or shame. I kept working at the bookstore, making jewelry, and volunteering with a local women's shelter, sharing our story when it felt safe to do so. There were still hard days, nights when memories threatened to pull me back under, when Olivia's old wounds flared up at school or online, but we had learned how to talk about it, how to support each other through storms. In the spaces between, I finally found time to reflect. I realized how much I had changed, how, after a lifetime of walking on eggshells, I'd finally learned to trust my judgment. I saw how much strength Olivia had grown, how fiercely she protected her peace. I learned that freedom is not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's the simple act of choosing where to live, what to create, and who to let into your life. We stopped measuring ourselves against my family's impossible standards. I still heard from my parents sometimes, brief emails about holidays or distant relatives. Caroline wrote a single, stiff apology letter. I replied with a short note of acceptance but did not invite them back into our daily lives. Our circle was smaller, but it was real, and I would not trade that hard-won authenticity for anything. On warm summer evenings, Olivia and I would sit on our back steps, the sounds of the city humming in the distance, fireflies flickering among the wildflowers I'd coaxed back to life. We talked about our dreams, about the business, about art and travel, and the people we loved. Sometimes we sat in silence, simply grateful to be together, safe in our little blue-shuttered house. Looking back, I realized that breaking the silence was the most courageous thing I'd ever done. I had always feared that speaking the truth would leave us alone, but in the end, it was the only path to connection and joy. We had lost an old life, but in its place, we had built something new, something honest, bright, and wholly our own. Olivia and I found freedom not in forgetting the past, but in learning from it, growing from it, and choosing every day to honor our voices. America was still full of challenges, but now, every day felt like a small victory. Our home was a testament to resilience, creativity, and the enduring power of love. In the end, we discovered that happiness was never about approval or perfection. It was about finding your way. Together, brick by brick,